So anytime you create a class, you must initialize your properties. So the standard way of doing that, the simplest way, is to go ahead and define default values right away. And in this case, I'm defining the data type, but we could eliminate that if we wanted to, and just do that. And now if we create an object based on our class, you can see that we can access the properties and run our code, and it works perfectly fine. The second way to create initial values in a class is with an initializer. So if you create a property and you do not give it an initial value, you need to define the data type, and you see here we're getting an error message saying no initializers. Because a class, when you define properties, it must have an initial value. And again, that initial value could be as simple as just a blank string or a 0. But if you do not define an initial value, then you have to create an initializer. And then you have to do this silly self equals name and self like this. And now when you create an object from that class, now you can access the properties, and if we run this code, you'll see that in this example we created a class with two properties and we assigned them initial values, Fido and 0, and then we created an object based on that class, and then we printed out those values, which is Fido and 0. In this class, we defined two properties, but we did not give them an initial value. And in this case, we also had to define the data type. Then we relied on an initializer. So each time we create an object from the class, we must assign it a value. So those are the two ways you can create initial values for a class. This way is much simpler because you just assign a simple value, such as 0 for the age. But the disadvantage of this method is you may not want to have, let's say, a blank string or a 0 for this property. With this second way, with an initializer, it forces you to define a valid and useful data for your properties. So these are the two ways you can create a class. One, by defining initial values, and two, by using an initializer.